What would you do if you found a stranger crying at your daughter's grave, holding a baby who turns out to be your granddaughter? Thomas Fairburn wasn't the type of man who cried in public. People in Phoenix knew his name because it was printed on the side of buildings, hospitals, charity centers, and even a highway exit. But none of that meant anything on the mornings he forced himself to walk through the gates of Greenwood Memory Lawn Cemetery. He came early, long before the Arizona heat settled in. The sun had barely lifted, casting a long shadow behind him as he followed the familiar stone path. Every year since his daughter's passing, he'd shown up on this exact date, at this exact hour. He always brought the same flowers. He always stayed for exactly 15 minutes. He always left before his heart got too heavy. But before he even reached her headstone, he stopped. Someone was already there. Not just someone. A man holding a tiny baby. Both of them facing Lily's grave like they belonged there more than he did. Thomas didn't speak at first. His brain tried to piece the scene together slowly, even though nothing about it made sense. The man was on his knees, his shoulders shaking. The baby, light brown skin, big tired eyes, rested against his chest. Her small fingers curled in his shirt. It took a moment before Thomas recognized him. "Marvin?" he breathed out. The man lifted his head, startled. It really was him. Marvin Deshawn, the janitor from the Fairburn Corporate Plaza. Thomas had seen him plenty of times, usually pushing a mop bucket or tidying up after meetings Thomas didn't even remember attending. They had never had a real conversation. Thomas doubted they even knew each other's voice. Yet here he was, crying at his daughter's grave. "What are you doing here?" Thomas asked, more confused than angry. He didn't raise his voice, but the tremble in it made the question sound harsher. Marvin stood up quickly, adjusting the baby in his arms as if shielding her. "Mr. Fairburn, I didn't expect you here." "That much is obvious." Thomas took a few steps closer. "Why are you crying at my daughter's grave? And whose child is that?" Marvin didn't speak right away. His eyes drifted back toward the headstone, and his lower lip quivered like he was choosing between fear and truth. Thomas didn't like that. He didn't like not knowing what this man knew. "Answer me," Thomas insisted, though his voice cracked on the last word. Marvin swallowed hard. "Sir, I shouldn't be the one standing here before you, not like this, but I come here every week, and today, I couldn't hold it in." The baby let out a soft whimper, gripping Marvin's collar tighter. Thomas noticed how gently the man rocked her, calming her without even thinking. "Why here?" Thomas repeated, softer now. "Why her grave?" Marvin slowly exhaled. "Because she was my wife." The world around Thomas seemed to fall silent at once. No cars from the street, no birds overhead, no breeze through the trees. His breath stopped somewhere in his chest. "What did you just say?" Marvin looked him straight in the eyes. "Lily was my wife." Thomas stared at him, stunned. The cemetery suddenly felt too small for the weight of the words that had just been spoken. "That's impossible," Thomas whispered. She never told me anything like that." "I know," Marvin said quietly. "She was scared." Thomas shook his head, needing something solid to hold on to, but his thoughts were scattered. "Scared of what?" Marvin didn't hesitate. "Scared you wouldn't accept me. Scared you wouldn't accept us." Thomas's gaze fell to the baby again. Her tiny fingers, her half-awake blink, the soft curls on her head. "Who is she?" he asked, though his voice already carried the answer he feared. Marvin tightened his hold protectively. "Her name is Ari Deshawn. She's your granddaughter." The word granddaughter struck Thomas with a force he couldn't prepare for. He felt his knees weaken, and he had to step back to stay upright. He'd spent a year mourning a daughter he barely understood, and now he learned he had lost more than he ever realized. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, but the words didn't form. Marvin's voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't want you to find out like this, but I couldn't keep hiding either." Thomas pressed a hand to his chest, trying to steady himself as the truth rearranged everything he thought he knew about his daughter's life. But before he could ask another question, something else caught his eye. A detail on Lily's grave he had never seen before. Thomas leaned in, squinting at the small object resting at the base of the headstone. It wasn't something he ever placed there, and he knew every item he had left on this grave since the day of the funeral. This one was different. It looked like a tiny crocheted shoe, a baby shoe. Soft yellow yarn, slightly worn, like it had been held often. He pointed at it. "What is that?" Marvin lowered his eyes as if the shoe carried more weight than a piece of fabric should. "Lily made it. Before Ari was born, she came up with the pattern on her own, said it helped her stay calm." Thomas gently picked it up. It felt too light for the heaviness it carried. "She never told me she was pregnant." "She wanted to," Marvin said quietly, "but every time she tried, she froze. She didn't want to lose you." Thomas clenched the shoe in his hand. "She lost me anyway." Marvin hesitated. "Sir, she never stopped loving you." The baby fussed again, a soft cry that broke the tension just slightly. Thomas glanced at her, really looked this time. "She looks like her," he murmured, almost to himself. Marvin nodded. "Everyone says she has her smile and her stubbornness." Thomas let the baby shoe drop gently back onto the grave. "How long were you two married?" 2 years. "And she kept that from me?" Marvin shifted his weight, regret etched into every line on his face. "It wasn't supposed to stay a secret forever. She wanted to introduce me to you slowly, so you didn't feel like she'd thrown her life away on some guy you barely knew." Thomas exhaled sharply. "Some guy I barely noticed." Marvin didn't deny it. "We were from different worlds. She understood that." "Different worlds don't matter," Thomas snapped, surprising even himself with the bitterness in his voice. "What matters is that she didn't trust me enough to tell me." Marvin's eyes softened. "She trusted you. She just didn't want to hurt you." Thomas looked away, jaw locked, but not in anger. It was sorrow fighting to escape. "So," he said slowly, "you've been coming here every week?" "Every Sunday," Marvin answered. "Rain or shine. I bring Ari so she grows up knowing her mom, even if she doesn't understand yet." Thomas let the words sink in. The baby made a tiny, sleepy hum, her cheek pressed against Marvin's chest. The scene stung. It was intimate. Father and child. Something he had never experienced with Lily at that age. Something he would never get with her again. "You should have told me," Thomas said softly. Marvin blinked. "Sir, I didn't think you want to hear it." "That's not your decision to make." Marvin lowered his gaze. "Maybe not. But Lily begged me to wait. She thought time would make it easier." Thomas felt a burn behind his eyes. He swallowed hard. Time ran out. Silence settled between them again. But this time, it wasn't cold. It was heavy with everything they both wished had gone differently. Finally, Thomas spoke again, his voice steadier. "Why today? Why are you crying today?" Marvin looked up at him, eyes shining, "Because today was supposed to be our anniversary." Thomas's breath caught. "And because," Marvin continued, looking at the grave, "this is the first year I have to tell her she's missing out on seeing her daughter grow." A long beat passed before Thomas whispered, "I didn't know she loved someone this deeply." Marvin's voice cracked. "She loved you just as deeply. She talked about you all the time." Thomas dug his fingers into the fabric of his suit jacket, trying to hold himself together. "I don't deserve that." Marvin adjusted Ari. "Maybe not, but she believed in forgiveness." Thomas stared at Lily's engraved name, tracing it with his eyes the same way he used to trace her handwriting on birthday cards she made as a child. "Why didn't she come home more often?" he asked quietly. "Why did she stay distant?" Marvin took a shaky breath. "Because she didn't want you to think she'd chosen me over you." Thomas closed his eyes. "I pushed her away," he whispered. "No," Marvin said, stepping closer. "She wanted to keep everything balanced. She just didn't know how." Thomas finally looked him in the eye. "So tell me everything, all of it. I need to know who my daughter really was." Marvin swallowed, tightening his hold on Ari. "I'll tell you, but it's a long story." Thomas nodded once. "I'm listening." But before Marvin could begin, Ari's soft whimper grew into a cry, forcing him to rock her gently. And suddenly, Thomas realized they couldn't continue this conversation standing over a grave. Thomas watched Marvin bounce the crying baby gently, swaying from side to side in that instinctive way only a parent seems to understand. Ari's tiny fists pushed against his chest, her little face scrunched up, fighting whatever discomfort babies fight. Hunger, tiredness, confusion, maybe all three at once. "We can't talk here," Thomas said. "Come with me." Marvin hesitated. Sir, I don't think... I'm not asking you as your boss, Thomas cut in, voice steady. I'm asking as Lily's father. That changed something. Marvin nodded slowly. They walked toward the parking lot. Thomas unlocked his car, a sleek black Lexus, and paused when he realized Marvin was instinctively backing away, as if he didn't want to dirty the leather seats with his work clothes. You're fine, Thomas said. Get in. Marvin opened the back door carefully and secured Ari into the car seat he carried everywhere. Thomas watched him buckle each strap with the same tenderness a surgeon uses in an operating room. Once the baby settled, they drove in silence toward a shaded picnic area nearby. It overlooked a small pond in Encanto Park, a place Lily used to love when she was in middle school. Thomas parked. They sat at a table under a tree. Marvin held Ari in his lap now, patting her back gently until she calmed. All right, Thomas said quietly. Tell me how it happened. How you two met. Marvin breathed out slowly. She was volunteering at the community center off 19th Avenue. I worked nights back then, so I'd stop by in the afternoons to help set up chairs for the tutoring sessions. Thomas raised an eyebrow. You volunteered too? Marvin nodded. Not much, just small things. I wasn't someone people would expect to tutor kids, but I could help with the heavy lifting. And she liked that? Marvin smiled faintly. She liked that I didn't try to impress her. Everyone else acted like she was made of gold because she carried your last name. I didn't know who she was at first. She didn't introduce herself as some heiress. She was just Lily to me. Thomas looked at the water. She used to do that, hide her last name. She thought people treated her differently because of it. They did, Marvin said, but I treated her the same way I treated everyone. She liked that. Thomas stayed quiet for a moment, processing. Marvin continued. We'd talk while we put away chairs. She asked about my life. I told her the truth. I didn't come from much. I worked janitorial jobs because they were steady. She never judged me, not once. Thomas stared at him, surprised by how painful admiration could feel. She said you two kept things private, Thomas said. Why so private? Marvin shifted, uncomfortable. She was nervous. She said you had big dreams for her, that you didn't want her settling for anything less than someone who could match your status. Thomas closed his eyes briefly. I didn't mean it like that. She didn't know that, Marvin replied softly. And, well, we were different in a lot of ways. Different. The word weighed heavily between them. Thomas leaned forward. Did she love you? Marvin nodded without hesitation. With everything she had. And you loved her? Still do, Marvin said, his voice breaking. She changed my whole life. Thomas swallowed hard. He heard truth in every syllable. And the marriage? He asked. Where did that happen? At the courthouse in Tempe. Small ceremony. No guests. She wore a simple dress. We planned to do a real wedding once things felt safe enough to tell you. Thomas felt a twist in his chest. Safe enough, he repeated quietly. She shouldn't have needed to feel safe from me. Marvin looked at him, not with judgment, but with sympathy. She didn't want to lose you. She really wanted you two to have a relationship again. Thomas wiped a hand over his face. I kept waiting for her to reach out. She thought I was upset with her for moving out. I thought she didn't want me involved in her life anymore. A misunderstanding turned into distance, Marvin said quietly. She talked about fixing it. She just didn't know how. Thomas took a shaky breath, staring at the pond. Ducks skimmed across the water like nothing in the world was wrong, but everything was wrong. Tell me about the pregnancy, Thomas said. Marvin's expression softened. She was so happy. She cried the day she found out. Not scared. Happy. She wanted to tell you. We argued about it sometimes. I begged her to tell you. Thomas looked at him sharply. You did? Of course, Marvin said. You're her father. I knew you deserved to know. She just wanted the moment to be perfect. Thomas's voice fell to a whisper. I would have given anything for imperfect. Marvin looked down at Ari, brushing a fingertip over her tiny curls. She told me she'd tell you after Ari was born. She thought holding your granddaughter would soften everything. Thomas felt that sentence in his bones. Why didn't she? He asked. Marvin closed his eyes. Because she never made it to the hospital. Thomas's breath stilled. Don't tell me yet, he whispered. I'm not ready for that part. Marvin nodded silently. Ari shifted in his lap, eyes half opening, searching for something familiar. Marvin rocked her again. Thomas watched, struck by the quiet, instinctive love in the man's movements. For the first time, Thomas truly understood. This man had loved his daughter in ways he never saw, and he loved this child with every fiber he had left. But Thomas also sensed Marvin was leaving something out, something heavier than heartbreak, something that was about to change the way he saw everything that happened the night his daughter died. For a while, neither of them spoke. The breeze lifted the surface of the pond in tiny ripples, and Ari made a soft clicking sound with her tongue as she drifted back toward sleep. It should have been a peaceful moment, but Thomas felt something clawing at him from the inside, a pressure he hadn't allowed himself to face in decades. He cleared his throat. "Marvin, tell me the truth, the full truth. What was Lily's life like with you? Was she happy?" Marvin didn't answer right away. Instead, he lifted Ari onto his shoulder and gently patted her back, staring at the water as if it held the memories he was pulling from. "She was happy," he finally said, "not because life was perfect, but because she felt free. With you, she was proud of what you built. But she always felt like she had to fit into this picture of who she was supposed to be with me. She didn't have to be anything except herself." Thomas rubbed his forehead. "I didn't know she felt trapped." "She didn't blame you for it," Marvin said. "She said it was just the way she grew up. Expectations everywhere she turned. She thought you were disappointed in her when she stepped outside of the path you imagined for her." "I was never disappointed," Thomas whispered. "Never." "She didn't know that," Marvin repeated gently. Thomas let that sit in his chest, heavy as a boulder. How many conversations had he postponed? How many times had he assumed she'd know how much he cared without ever hearing it from him? "She told me once," Marvin added softly, "that she wanted you to see her for who she really was, not just who you hoped she'd become." Thomas tightened his grip around the edge of the table. "I didn't realize she thought that way." "She wanted to talk to you," Marvin said. "She'd rehearse what she wanted to say. She even wrote letters, but she never sent them." Thomas's head snapped up. "Letters?" Marvin nodded slowly. "I have them at home." A wave of guilt washed through Thomas so suddenly he had to steady himself. His daughter had tried to reach him silently in writing, while he waited for her to say something she was too scared to say out loud. "What did she write?" Thomas asked, his voice rough. "I didn't read all of them," Marvin said. "Some were personal, meant for you. But the ones I did read were full of love. She talked about missing you, wishing things could be simple again, wishing you could meet me without judging her." Thomas pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose, breathing slowly. "I feel like I failed her." "You didn't fail her," Marvin said firmly. "You just didn't know." "But I should have," Thomas argued. "I should have paid more attention. I should have asked her more questions. I should have been there." Marvin looked at him, really looked at him, with a softness Thomas didn't expect from someone who had every reason to resent him. "She loved you, sir, even when she disagreed with you, even when she was scared. She loved you more than she ever let on." Thomas swallowed. "And I loved her more than she ever knew." Marvin shifted Ari again, giving her a gentle bounce. "Then maybe it's not too late to know her better. Even now." "How?" Thomas whispered. "She's gone." "Through her daughter," Marvin said quietly. "Through her letters, through the things she left behind. You might not get the years you lost, but you can still learn who she became." Thomas met his eyes, and for the first time since arriving at the cemetery, something inside him began to soften. The anger, the confusion, the shock. They all started melting into something more human, something painfully clear. "I want to know everything," Thomas said. "And I want to help. With Ari. With you. With anything you need." Marvin stared at him, surprised. "You don't owe me anything." "But I owe her everything," Thomas replied. For the first time, Marvin didn't look like a man standing in the shadow of Thomas's wealth or power. He looked like a father, just like him, trying to carry the weight of a future he didn't expect. "All right," Marvin said. "I'll tell you what happened that night." He shifted in his seat, the memory clearly hard for him to revisit. Thomas leaned in, bracing himself. But before Marvin began, Ari's tiny hand reached out and brushed Thomas's wrist. A small touch that hit him harder than any sentence ever could. Ari's little fingers curled around Thomas's wrist like she was claiming him without even knowing who he was. He froze. Her touch was soft, barely more than a brush, but the impact hit him straight in the chest. It felt like Lily reaching out through time, through loss, through everything he'd failed to understand. Marvin gave a small smile. She likes grabbing whatever she can reach. She's curious. Thomas cleared his throat, trying to steady his voice. She has her mother's hands. Marvin nodded. Yeah, same long fingers. Same way of holding on tight when she wants comfort. For a moment, all three of them stayed there in silence. But the silence wasn't cold anymore. It felt like a pause. The kind people take when they're standing between the past and something new they didn't see coming. Let me drive you home, Thomas said. You can tell me the rest there. Marvin hesitated. My place isn't exactly... Doesn't matter, Thomas cut in. I want to see where my granddaughter lives. Marvin blinked at the word granddaughter. He wasn't used to hearing it from Thomas's mouth, and Thomas wasn't used to saying it, but somehow it felt right. They got back in the car. Ari fell asleep almost instantly, her soft breaths filling the quiet as Thomas drove through Phoenix, past familiar roads that somehow didn't feel the same anymore. Every few seconds, his eyes drifted to the rearview mirror. He wasn't watching the traffic. He was watching her. Marvin gave directions until they reached a small apartment building near Roosevelt Street. It wasn't run down, but it wasn't polished either. It looked like the kind of place where people worked hard and tried their best to make life decent with what they had. When they reached apartment 2B, Marvin unlocked the door and stepped aside. It's not much, but it's home. Thomas walked in slowly. The apartment was neat, really neat. A tiny living room, soft beige couch, a thrift store coffee table, and pictures pinned to a corkboard on the wall. Not fancy frames, just simple prints. And instantly Thomas noticed one photo among them. Lily laughing, hair pulled back, hands covered in what looked like paint, a smudge across her cheek. She looked free, happier than he'd seen her in years. He stepped closer. When was this? Marvin walked over, Ari still against his shoulder. We were repainting this place. She insisted on choosing the colors. I kept telling her the landlord wasn't going to be thrilled, but she didn't care. Thomas felt something tighten in his throat again. She looks alive. She was, Marvin said softly. She didn't need big houses or fancy things. She just wanted a place where she could breathe. Thomas nodded slowly. I wish she told me. She tried, Marvin repeated. Not as much as she should have, but she did. Thomas turned away from the photos and noticed the small nursery space set up beside the living room. Not even a separate room, just a corner with soft blankets, a secondhand crib, and toys arranged neatly in a basket. You did all this? He asked. Yeah, Marvin said. I wanted her to have what Lily planned for her. What did Lily plan? To give her the childhood she wished she had. Thomas blinked hard at that. Can I hold her? He asked quietly. Marvin hesitated for half a second, not out of distrust, but because the moment felt fragile. Then he nodded and gently transferred Ari into Thomas's arms. The baby stirred, but didn't cry. Her small hand pressed against Thomas's chest, and he froze again. He'd carried business deals worth billions. He'd shaken hands with presidents, but nothing in his life had ever felt as delicate, as terrifying, or as important as holding this tiny child. She's warm, Thomas whispered. Marvin smiled. She falls asleep faster if you sway a little. Thomas awkwardly shifted his stance and swayed side to side. Ari's breathing deepened, tiny and steady. For the first time in a long time, Thomas felt something soften inside him, something he didn't know he still had left. After a minute, he asked, Marvin, tell me about the night. What happened to Lily? I need to know. Marvin's smile faded. His posture changed. The air in the room grew heavier. All right, he said quietly, but what I'm about to tell you, it's not easy. Not for you, not for me. Thomas held Ari a little tighter. I'm ready. Marvin nodded, sitting down slowly on the couch, his eyes fixed on a spot on the floor, as if the memory lived there. It wasn't just an accident, he began. There's more you don't know. Thomas felt the hairs on his arms rise, but before Marvin continued, a sudden knock at the door made them both turn, and the look on Marvin's face told Thomas that whoever stood outside wasn't someone he expected. Marvin stiffened the moment the knocking started. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't light either. The kind of knock that told you someone wasn't there for a friendly visit. Thomas shifted Ari slightly, careful not to wake her, and glanced at Marvin. You expecting someone? He asked. Marvin shook his head. No, not today. The knock came again, this time sharper. Marvin stood slowly and walked to the door, peeking through the peephole. His shoulders sagged with relief, but relief mixed with hesitation. It's my neighbor, he said. Miss Riley. Thomas watched as Marvin opened the door halfway. A woman in her late 60s stood there, holding a small bag of groceries. She had silver hair pulled into a loose bun and wore a faded blue cardigan. Her gaze flicked past Marvin and landed on Thomas immediately. Oh, she said, you have company today. Marvin cleared his throat. Miss Riley, this is Thomas. She stared at him for a few seconds, recognizing his face from the news, or maybe from the buildings that carried his last name. She stepped inside only enough to hand Marvin the grocery bag. You ran out of diapers yesterday, she said. Figured you'd need more. Marvin smiled faintly. Thank you. I appreciate it. She nodded, then looked at Thomas again, her voice lowering. He's a good father, just so you know. Thomas blinked, unsure how to respond to praise he felt he didn't deserve. I can see that, he said quietly. Miss Riley offered a gentle smile and backed toward the hall. I'll leave you all to talk. When the door clicked shut, Thomas looked at Marvin. You've got people looking out for you. Marvin shrugged softly. She's been helping me since Ari was born. Brings food sometimes, checks in when I work late. Thomas nodded slowly. Lily would have liked her. I think so too. They sat again, and Marvin folded his hands together, elbows resting on his knees. His face changed, less guarded, but weighed down by something he couldn't carry alone. You said the accident wasn't just an accident, Thomas said. Tell me what you meant. Marvin took a deep breath. That night, she wasn't just heading home. She was heading to see you. Thomas's heartbeat thudded once, painfully. To see me? Why? She'd finally made up her mind. She wanted to tell you everything. About me, about the marriage, about the baby. She said she didn't care what your reaction would be. She just wanted to stop hiding. Thomas held Ari tighter. I didn't know she planned that. She was nervous, Marvin said softly. But she packed a small bag with the ultrasound pictures, her wedding ring, and a letter she wrote for you. Thomas closed his eyes. A letter. She put it in the glove compartment, Marvin added. The police told me afterward. They said they recovered the bag but didn't understand its meaning. Thomas's voice cracked. Why didn't they give it to me? I don't know, Marvin answered. I only found out because I kept calling the station until someone finally checked for me. They said they still had the items in storage, but I never went to get them. It felt too painful. Thomas opened his eyes, anger and heartbreak swirling in them. She was coming to me, and I didn't even know. Marvin's hands tightened together. She was tired. She'd worked a long shift and then stayed late at the community center. She shouldn't have been driving, but she insisted it had to be that night. She said something felt urgent. Thomas took a slow, trembling breath. What caused the crash? Marvin swallowed. A truck drifted into her lane. The driver admitted he looked down to grab his phone. She tried to swerve, but her car flipped. Thomas stared at the floor, jaw trembling. She died because someone wasn't paying attention, and I never got the chance to hear her tell me the truth. Marvin's voice softened to a whisper. She loved you, sir. Even at the end, she was trying to fix things. Thomas felt the weight of it settle into his bones. The missed calls, the distance, the silence, the years of stubborn pride on both sides. He finally managed to speak. I want to get her things. Today. Marvin nodded. We can go. I'll help you. Thomas looked down at the sleeping baby in his arms, her tiny breaths pressed against his chest like little reminders of the life Lily left behind. Thank you, he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he meant it for Marvin, for Ari, or for the chance to make things right, even if only in pieces. But before they could stand, Ari stirred in Thomas's arms, eyes blinking open. And the way she looked at him, curious and calm, made something inside him shift in a way he hadn't felt in years. Ari's eyes fluttered open, wide and glassy, as if waking up mid-dream. For a moment, she stared directly at Thomas, studying his face like newborns do. Slow, unblinking, almost searching. Thomas froze, unsure of what to do. He'd held babies before, usually at charity events or family gatherings, but he'd never held one that belonged to him. Not like this. Ari reached up with her tiny hand and touched the collar of his shirt. It wasn't a grab this time, more like a soft tap, a question, a simple, "Who are you?" Thomas exhaled slowly. "Hey there," he whispered, his voice gentler than he knew it could be. I'm your grandfather." The word still felt enormous, too big for his throat, too heavy for his chest, but saying it made something shift inside him. A small click, like a lock finally opening. Marvin watched from the couch, eyes tired but warm. "She likes your voice," he said. "Some people make her cry right away, but she's calm with you." Thomas looked up at him. "She's calm with you because she knows you. I'm a stranger." Marvin shook his head. "Not anymore." Ari let out a tiny sound, halfway between a sigh and a coo, then rested her head against Thomas's chest. It took him by surprise. He glanced at Marvin, unsure if he'd done something right or wrong. "She likes feeling someone's heartbeat," Marvin explained. "When she was a newborn, that's the only way I could get her to sleep." Thomas swallowed. The small weight of her body against him felt like it was rewriting years of mistakes in real time. He shifted slightly, finding a more secure hold, and something inside him cracked open, the kind of crack that lets the light in. "Marvin," he said quietly, "I need to understand something." Marvin straightened. "What is it?" "You said she wrote letters," Thomas said. "Letters she never sent. Did she ever resent me?" Marvin shook his head immediately. "No, not once. She got frustrated sometimes, yeah. But she didn't resent you. She said you carried so much on your shoulders that sometimes you forgot how to carry yourself." Thomas felt the words hit deeper than he expected. "She said that?" "More than once," Marvin said. "She wanted you to live, not just work." Thomas looked down at Ari again. "I thought providing was enough." "It was," Marvin replied. "But she wanted you, not just the success, not just the name. She wanted the man." Thomas had no answer. He'd spent years believing the best way to love Lily was to give her everything he never had, but maybe all she wanted was something he rarely gave. His time. "Marvin," he said, his voice tightening, "I can't change the past, but I want to be here now for Ari. For whatever you need." Marvin's expression softened with something like relief. "I'm glad to hear that." Thomas hesitated. "You've done this alone for months. How did you manage?" Marvin looked down at his hands. "Honestly, some days I barely did. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with her crying, feeling like I was failing at everything, but then I'd remember how excited Lily was to become a mom. I promised her I'd give Ari the life she deserved." "You kept that promise," Thomas said. "I try," Marvin replied. Thomas shifted Ari gently into the crook of one arm. "Let me help you now." Marvin blinked, surprised. "Help? How?" "With everything," Thomas said. "Childcare, money, support, whatever you need. This is my granddaughter, and Lily would want me to help raise her." Marvin braced his elbows on his knees, overwhelmed. "I didn't think you'd want to be part of her life." "I didn't know she existed," Thomas said, "but now that I do, I'm not letting her go." Ari yawned against his chest, her small mouth opening just enough to make Thomas smile. It was a simple thing, a baby's yawn. But it felt like a doorway opening between two men who had been on opposite sides of the same grief. "You're doing good with her," Marvin said. Thomas looked startled. "You think so?" "I know so," Marvin answered. "She can feel when someone cares." Thomas lifted one hand and gently smoothed the curls on Ari's head. "I care," he whispered, "more than I knew I could." Marvin leaned back on the couch, exhausted but lighter than he had been minutes earlier. "I'm glad she has you." "And I'm glad she has you," Thomas said. "You saved her." "I'm just trying to survive," Marvin replied softly. "You did more than that," Thomas said. "You held our family together without even knowing it." The words hung in the room like a truce. Not forced, not rushed, simply the truth. "Let's go get Lily's things," Thomas said. "I want to read the letter. I want to understand everything." Marvin nodded. "We can go now. The station's open." Thomas stood up with Ari still in his arms, and for the first time, he looked like a man who wasn't carrying grief, but purpose. But as they stepped toward the door, Marvin's phone buzzed on the table, and the look that crossed his face told Thomas that whatever was coming next wasn't going to be simple. Marvin reached for his phone, and the moment he saw the screen, the color drained from his face. Thomas shifted Ari in his arms, watching him carefully. "Everything all right?" Thomas asked. Marvin didn't answer right away. He stared at the phone like it carried a weight he wasn't prepared to pick up. Finally, he exhaled. "It's the police station. I left a message earlier asking about Lily's belongings. They're calling back." Thomas nodded. "Answer it." Marvin swiped to take the call. "Hello? Yes, this is Marvin Deshawn." He listened, eyes narrowing slightly. Yes, I understand. We're on our way now." His eyebrows tightened. "Wait, what do you mean it's not just the bag? What else is there?" He paused. "All right, we'll be there soon." When he hung up, Thomas stepped closer. "What did they say?" Marvin rubbed the back of his neck. "The officer said they found something else with Lily's things, something they didn't realize belonged to her at first." Thomas frowned. "What is it?" "He wouldn't tell me over the phone," Marvin said, "but he said it was stored separately, marked as unidentified property." Thomas tightened his hold on Ari. "Then let's go." They drove silently toward the station. Ari fell asleep again, her tiny breaths filling the car with a sense of calm that none of the adults felt. When they arrived, Marvin led the way inside. A young officer recognized his name and disappeared into the back room. Minutes passed before he returned with a box, not a large one, not heavy, just a cardboard container with a few pieces of tape holding it shut. He set it on the counter. "This was recovered from the vehicle," the officer explained. "We weren't sure what it belonged to until Mr. Deshawn called." Thomas stepped forward. "What's in it?" The officer gestured for them to open it. Marvin peeled back the tape slowly. Inside were Lily's things. The small bag she packed, the ultrasound photos, her wallet, a pair of earrings Thomas had bought her when she turned 21, and near the bottom, a sealed white envelope with handwriting Thomas recognized instantly, his own name on the front. He reached for it, his fingers trembling. Marvin and the officer stepped back, giving him space. Even Ari seemed to sense something important was happening. She stirred, but didn't cry. Thomas opened the letter. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The handwriting wasn't perfect, slightly rushed, the way Lily always wrote when she was nervous. He swallowed hard and forced himself to read. "Dad, if you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage to tell you everything. I hope you're not angry. I hope you understand why I waited. I didn't want you to think I chose someone over you. I love you. I always did. But I also love Marvin, and I love our baby. I want you to meet her. I want you to know her. I want her to know the grandfather I always bragged about. I hope today is a new beginning. For all of us, love, Lily." By the time he reached the signature, Thomas's vision blurred. He pressed the letter to his chest, his shoulders shaking as a deep, raw grief finally cracked through the shell he'd spent years building. Marvin stepped forward carefully. "Sir, I'm sorry." Thomas shook his head, still holding the paper against him. "You loved her," he whispered. "You protected her. You gave her a life. A real life. I can never repay that." Marvin looked down. "I just wish she got the chance to say all this herself." "So do I," Thomas said. "More than you know." He folded the letter gently, placing it back into the envelope, as if it were the most precious thing he'd ever held. Maybe it was. When they stepped outside, the sunlight hit them with a quiet warmth. Thomas looked at Ari sleeping in the car seat and then at Marvin, who seemed lost between sorrow and relief. "I want to help you raise her," Thomas said softly. "Not as a stranger, as family." Marvin's eyes glistened. "I'd like that." Thomas placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll make sure she grows up knowing who her mother was, and knowing she was loved by both of us." Marvin nodded slowly, a weight finally lifting from his posture. "She deserves that." They stood there in the parking lot. A wealthy man who had spent too much of his life alone, and a young father who had carried more than anyone ever realized, and between them, a baby girl whose tiny heartbeat had the power to bring two broken men into the same unknown, hopeful future. Thomas glanced toward the sky. "Lily, we're going to be all right. Not perfect, not healed overnight, but all right. Life doesn't always give second chances, but when it does, even if it comes late, even if it comes wrapped in heartbreak, you take it, you hold it tight, and you don't let it slip away. If you're watching this right now, reach out to someone you've lost touch with. Say what you've been meaning to say. Don't wait for tomorrow. Some words need to be spoken today.